traveling has probably been the biggest learning experience for me outside of like what my parents have instilled in me and any educational system. And just learning and seeing how other people live it's life changing when you are able and have that opportunity to experience other cultures. You expand.
Who are you?
I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller.
In telling stories about gay characters.
The world was filled with people who occupy different intersections of otherness.
And I was fortunate enough to get in front of creative teams that were woke enough to see my light, to have conversations with others.
Who is this biracial angel, trans women and trans men?
I celebrate myself. Celebrate yourself and love each other. Hello, everybody, and welcome to JBC Presents Conversations with Others. I'm Jeffrey Boyer Chapman. I feel so blessed to be sitting down in conversation with today's guest. She's someone I've wanted to have on this podcast for quite some time now. She is an entrepreneur, style maven, owner and visionary behind the concept store Sincerely Tommy, located in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and someone who I am blessed to be able to call one of my dearest friends and favorite folk on the planet. And now, for the simplest and most complex question of all, who are you?
Hi, everybody. I would say I'm an explorer. I am a visionary in the most humblest of ways, meaning I follow my vision. I like to create a vision, and I am a mother.
Hi, my love. So for everyone out there who's listening, this is one of my dearest friends, Kai Avent-deLeon. Hi, my love. How are you today?
I'm good. This morning was actually really, really nice. Yesterday I had an extremely challenging day, and I say that with full awareness of the privilege that I was even able to say it was challenging. But I just had, one of those days where I was going deep and shedding some layers and having some really tough conversations with myself about myself. And anytime I do that, I just try to make sure that I go to sleep on a more positive note as to avoid, self-destruction and self-condemnation. So today I woke up feeling a bit more relieved and like I let that go and I shed it and it's gone.
What inspired you to dive into that conversation with yourself?
Honestly, well, the first thing was I had some really good weed.
Yes, hydroponic love.
Yeah. I got this weed with the hopes that it would help me go to sleep better, and it actually is making me stay up and think a lot deeper than I normally do. But anyway, I just was like sitting on my couch and I just started crying, and it was a really good cry. It felt like a release. And then I just had a conversation with myself around what I guess forgiveness looks like of self. I think it's like one of the hardest things as humans that we face. It's easier to forgive other people, but what does it look like to forgive yourself? Whether it's for making bad choices or not treating yourself kindly, whatever it is, self-forgiveness is it's challenging. And so I think with all of this stillness that most of us are in, there is no other choice but to face yourself. We don't have a lot of distractions that we may normally have through our regular routines. And so I personally have just been taking the time to kind of meditate on things that I feel like I have thought about, but may have left my mind because I'm going into a next activity and,
Right.
So that's kind of where I was yesterday.
Yeah, this is a conversation, a similar conversation I was having a few weeks ago with my guest, Brooklyn Heights, around this time when we have this abundant amount of time to ourselves. It is an opportunity for us to dive into a level of introspection that we may have been avoiding for days, months, years on end, just because we have endless distractions all around us. But, as uncomfortable as it may be right now, I feel like it's necessary for the evolution of the species because it all begins with us. It all begins with our experience in the outside world is only a reflection of what's going on with us internally. So when we have that in a nourished and healthy state, we're able to navigate our way through the world in a way that's healthier and engage with our fellow human beings in a way that's much kinder and loving and more compassionate. And yeah, we were talking about beginning with making amends with people who we may have quote unquote done wrong in the past, and the healing effect that can have not only on the person you are apologizing or making amends to, but healing and loving and forgiving yourself in that respect as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's actually something that I did with some people that I feel like I had wronged or hurt throughout the years. And it is very healing. It's also something that's really challenging to do. I think we have a tendency to maybe realize what we have done, or just coming to that realization, but not always taking the next step.
Or even knowing how necessarily. I mean, it's not something we're really taught as a society.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of integrity.
Oh God. And such shedding of the ego to be able to acknowledge that we aren't always right. And in fact, very oftentimes we're wrong. And even though we may not feel that way from our perspective, just acknowledging that in protecting ourselves and, or blindly working our way through the world, we can do a lot of hurt or harm to others.
Right.
Yeah. Also, it was the full moon the past couple of nights. So that brings up a lot of shit, honey.
Oh, yeah. Oof. It was a Scorpio full moon too, right?
Yes. Not even, just no big deal. Just like one of the most intense full moons there are.
Very intense. Damn, it really was.
Mm-hmm.
Nature is really serving us right now.
Oh, Gaia, mother.
All been bad.
I know. We're being punished. I know we're being scolded by Mother Earth. Girl, we have had it coming. As a collective, did you have any practices on the full moon, specifically?
Usually I just meditate. I love my sound bowl. Che, my son, for everyone who doesn't know who that is, loves the sound bowl. So we'll get that out. I cleanse all the crystals that you gave him, and then all the crystals. But yeah, we have small routines. And I try not to have screens around when I know there's a full moon, just to clear the energy, the space. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Well, I mean, there's so much of what we've already gotten into we can touch on throughout the course of the conversation. But, I did start out your introduction by saying that you're someone who I've wanted to have on the show for a long time now, honestly, since the conception of it, just because I love the conversations that you and I have as friends for so many years now. And I speak so often on the show about the power of expanders, of conscious expanders, of seeing the people who came before us, who have blazed trails and have gone where not only where not many have gone before, but have also navigated their way through the world in ways that we aren't necessarily accustomed to seeing. I know for myself the power of having discovered the memoirs of Maya Angelou and James Baldwin and Langston Hughes and hearing their stories and realizing for myself that these extraordinary human beings began their lives in a very similar fashion to my own. And knowing their stories somehow helped to make the seemingly unattainable things in life come into reach for me. So I know that by you sharing your story, which I think is so powerful, is going to serve as a priceless blueprint for someone out there listening to aspire to their own personal greatness. Because, girl, we need more young Black baddies out there in the world taking over, honey.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can kind of I always start with Grammy because she's, the beginning.
Yes. I remember being at your grandmother's birthday party at her house maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, and one of your older male relatives making a birthday toast and saying that your grandmother had planted roots in and was staking her claim in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, long before it was the Bed-Stuy we have come to know it as today. Back in the 1980s is when she immigrated there. has she shared with you the experience that she lived during that time coming to Brooklyn in the 80s?
Yeah, I mean, Grammy is a storyteller at heart, so that's her language. She tells stories. So we always kind of hear like what she experienced throughout the years, and just with her coming here, it wasn't planned. I think she just inherited a strong sense of intuition. I think, our ancestors naturally just that was something that they cultivated that was innately in us, was our intuitive nature. And so when she came here, it was just off the strength of hearing a colleague saying that they were buying a home in Bed-Stuy, and she thought it sounded like a good idea. She's like, that's something to do. So she took a loan from her sister and saved some money and purchased a property here at the time for $60,000, which is unheard of, obviously, today. And everyone thought she was crazy because Bed-Stuy was what it was, and it just wasn't a place you'd even come to visit. And she said she just had a feeling about it. She had a feeling that this was where she needed to set her roots. And she came here from Grenada, having 3 kids. Her husband left her for another family right across the street. So yes,
Niggas.
typical West Indian man. He had this family across the street, didn't even acknowledge the fact he was still married to my grandmother. They actually never got a divorce. So he wasn't taking care of them, helping out at all. Mom and her siblings would see him and the family all the time, but never get a hello or anything. And so she came here because she felt like she needed to make a better life. She was the main supporter, the only supporter for her 3 kids. So when she came, it wasn't with them. She sent for them when they were 2 because she could afford at that time to actually take care of them. So they came to America when they were 2 years old. And she was working 3 different jobs. And one of her siblings was working at NYU. So she was able to get a job in the laboratories there. So she was testing the bacteria in the petri dishes. And worked there for about 30 years. I remember very vividly going in there and playing with all of those petri dishes. But anyway, so she did that, and every time she kind of acquired a new property, it was just through chance or intuition. She had a feeling because she saw a window in one of the brownstones and was like, there's something about this window. I know I'm supposed to be here. And that was just kind of how it unfolded. And then she actually, in the 90s, opened up her own real estate company, very small. It was like her, my mom, and my uncle were the only brokers. And she did that for a while and then retired from that. And I think she just really laid the foundation for my mom and I to set our own path, just follow whatever it is that we wanted to do. And so my mom, after years of also working in different industries, mostly education, she ventured out and opened up a vegan juice bar and cafe and did that for about 5 years. And she was the first Black woman to do something in that kind of wellness diet space, at least in that area. She kind of was the first cafe to start doing acai and yerba mate. So that was really cool. So having that just be the foundation for me, like I never felt comfortable working for other people. And so after having a long time of working in retail, I just knew that was what I wanted. I wanted to open up my own store. And obviously through that, it's kind of changed as I've changed. I think Sincerely Tommy is more than just a retail space. It's this hub for creatives that live in Bed-Stuy. And it's also changed so drastically because the neighborhood has changed. Like in the last 6 years, it's gone from being over 50% Black to being less than 30% Black. So yeah, it's changed a lot.
Your mother and your grandmother, too, are truly 2 of the most stunningly beautiful, stylish, artistic, driven, badass Black women that I have ever known. They're such forces to be reckoned with. Let's talk about what it was like for you being raised by such brilliant, powerful female forces. Was there strength? Was there foresight and their intuition, all of their magic, essentially, all of their Black woman magic? Was that something that you were always keenly aware of, or was it just the norm for you because it was all you had known?
I definitely think it was a bit of the norm. I didn't feel maybe like I don't like that word different, but maybe I was experiencing different things than some other people until I was in school and saw that, I had a different type of diet and I was exposed to different things. And my parents were pushing for me to take all kinds of lessons because they wanted me to exercise my creative abilities. And as I got older, I think that continued. And so I guess if anything, it kind of shaped this duality that I am more aware of having now and kind of thankful for. But I feel like they definitely they set the bar high. They set the bar really high, and I'm really appreciative of that. I think with my grandmother, especially, just seeing some of the things that she would do over the years, like using her home as an art gallery for young local Black artists who may not get exposure otherwise, was something that I knew was special at a really young age. Like, this is cool. This is so cool. Like, this is Danny Simmons artwork in your home right now. Like, she was so passionate about creating that space for the community. And I think also because, there were these two different sides of the spectrum in Bed-Stuy at that time. Like, we lived on the block where on the corner you got the guys selling drugs, and then you have different families on every other house who are living in poverty to some degree. And then you have other Black families who are maybe middle class or working families. And so to see that even though those differences may have existed, there was still this sense of community, and you could play with the kids on the block regardless of what the social status was, I think was really powerful. We all had each other's backs. My babysitter still lives on this block. I mean, he's much older now, but Mr. Wright is still here. And so she knew that when she came here. And so to see her be so intuitively connected to that definitely had a lot to do with, I think, why I chose to stay in this neighborhood with my business.
Yeah, and I know how important that neighborhood is to you.
Yeah.
And your intention of creating a space and following your mother and your grandmother's footsteps and creating a space for young Black creatives to collect, to connect, and to thrive, and also encouraging the boom of Black business owners in Bed-Stuy, because as you said, over the past 6 years, it's our numbers have dwindled in that neighborhood due to gentrification. Was that something that you saw coming, like from the time that you were a teenager? Did you were literally born and raised in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Is this something that was like a slow burn for you, or were you always conscious of it?
No, I think we were all pretty conscious of it. The first restaurant that came was Peaches.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it was when that restaurant came, we all kind of knew, like, oh shit, like things are about to get serious. Because we didn't have like nice things like that in the neighborhood. There weren't restaurants outside of the chicken and Chinese takeout spots, or, we had to go elsewhere for it. So when that came, it was just like the starting point, and then Serengina kind of followed. And I think when that restaurant came, it was like the real shift. And so when I opened the store, I was definitely highly aware that things were shifting. And for me, it was more about like being that kind of weird Black girl growing up. Like, I went to a lot of white schools and had that typical I'm the only Black girl in this school experience. Yeah. I know I'm not white, but you kind of want to fit in too, because you're a kid and you want friends. And then having that experience and then going to predominantly Black schools, you're talking different, your interests are a little different. So you're always trying to find that middle ground where you fit in, but you're also being who you are. And
I didn't know that code switching was a thing until well into my late 20s, early 30s.
yeah.
It was just something that I was kind of forced into for survival.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did you deal with that? Like what were some of the challenges that you had or
I mean, so many of the same challenges that so many young queer people face in a predominantly patriarchal, heteronormative, status quo society. We have to water down the most precious parts of ourselves in order to make the status quo comfortable in our presence. We have to constantly police ourselves and monitor ourselves, the cadence of our voice, our mannerisms, the way that we walk, our style of dress, our interests that are in our passions that are coming from a really like authentic, soulfully driven place. We have to be so conscious of how we present ourselves to the world can be viewed, and how the tiniest thing that may seem so normal and authentic to us can just really set other people off and put us in a place of like of physical danger. So I think that truly for so many years it was just me, like I said, having to monitor all of those things, and never quite feeling like I had the safety or privilege or freedom just to be myself. Finding very like rare fleeting moments where if I wasn't by myself, if I was other people, where I could authentically and genuinely express myself and feel safe in doing so. It wasn't until I moved away from that small town and moved really to New York, to America, where I felt like I was finally being celebrated for all of those qualities of otherness in my character that I had to police my whole life prior to moving to New York. I think I had a lot of shame around queerness, a lot of shame around Blackness because of the messages that were being fed to me. And the thing is, these messages weren't only necessarily being fed to me from my peers, from it wasn't coming out of the mouths of babes. It wasn't just the cruel things that kids can say to each other. So many of these messages of me not being worthy or of value or good were coming from adult figures and people who I was taught and trained to look up to and respect. Teachers and business owners, and my parents' friends, and my stepfather, and all these people. It's hard for a kid to receive all of these messages for so many years and to be bombarded with them, that who you are is not of value, and this is what a fag looks like, and a queer looks like, and this is what a nigger looks like, and a thug looks like. And it's like it was so many years of me trying to not only navigate and police and monitor myself around my queerness and my Blackness to keep me physically safe, but then also trying to differentiate between what I knew to be true of myself and the messages that people were feeding me around queerness and Blackness, and where do I fit into all of that, and what do I believe in what they're saying, and what do I know intrinsically to be true. Like it took a lot of constant self-awareness, like a level of mindfulness that I think in my adult years has benefited me, but at the time as a child it was just so exhausting, and no kid should have to be that hyper aware at all times. So it took a lot of undoing, and so much of that undoing around Blackness specifically was when I first was embraced by you and your tribe.
Yeah.
Showing me what the beauty of Blackness really is.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I can't relate on every level, but I do know the struggle of just being in a community or surrounded by people who don't necessarily look like you and you can't relate to. So
yeah,
it's tough.
How did you feel like you felt like, like a bit of a weirdo or an other when you were in your like predominantly white schools? Did you feel like an other when you weren't the minority, when you were around other people who looked like you? Did you still feel like a different or like an outcast?
More self-conscious when I was around people who looked like me, because I sounded so different, and so for about 7 years, we actually lived upstate in Hamilton. My mom was working at Colgate University, her alma mater. And so that town is so white, like just very typical small town, no sense of like culture outside of what's in the town. And so being there, I think I got used to it because I was so young that I didn't necessarily know much else. Like I came from Brooklyn, but I was still pretty young. So it wasn't like I was just traumatized, like, oh, this is so different.
How old were you? What ages?
Like 5, because I did kindergarten to the 4th grade there. Yeah. And so when we came back to Brooklyn, that's when I felt more self-conscious because overall, I think as a Black community, we're very judgmental of each other. And we tend to kind of stick to these boxes that I think society puts us in. We're either one way or the other way. And if we're not in those two ways, we're in between, and anything in between is usually not understood. So yeah, I think I was definitely more self-conscious when I came back to Brooklyn, and I always knew I was Black. It wasn't like, I was trying to deny that fact, but I didn't necessarily have like a thick Brooklyn accent. I wasn't using some of the terms that my peers were using. And my parents, they've always been pretty pro-Black and just all about the natural. So my hair was always natural. I just wasn't doing a lot of things that my peers were doing because of the beliefs that they were trying to instill in me. But yeah, I think as you get older too, you start to become more comfortable with who you are, and in turn, you find others who are like-minded, and that's kind of what happened for me.
Definitely. What were your teenage years like? Like I so upon meeting you, I just like still to this day, I wish that I was friends with Kai when she was a teenager. I know that there were a few years there. There was a bit of a gap there where you were, kind of putting on the drag of the badass troubled teen, and your mother ended up sending you away to live with your father in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. That was in high school. Actually, yeah, when I met Malish, because I started high school in the city at Talent Unlimited.
One of our dear, close mutual friends, yeah. Melissa Lyde.
Yeah, we met in high school. I was studying drama and she was studying musical theater. Oh, no, she was studying music. She, I think, was playing like the clarinet or the flute.
Of course she was.
And like within my first week of school, this girl just decided that she did not like me and wanted to fight me. I had never had a fight, didn't know anything about fighting, but yeah, it happened. And I don't know, I had to defend myself, and I did. And we got suspended, like in school suspension for a few days. And my mom just like freaked out. She was like, this is not my child. Like, this is not what I've exposed her to. And so she was like, you got to go live in DC with your dad.
That's so drastic.
Yeah, it is. My mom with the punishments was just like, it went from 0 to 100 really quick. So I went down there and it was actually worse. DC was way worse because that's when it was still like DC, like kind of dangerous. And so now we're talking about this girl who doesn't necessarily sound a certain way, doesn't dress like us, and she's from New York. So I had a terrible experience living in DC. Just like, I think every day was pretty depressed. I had a couple of friends, but outside of that, it was just honestly like defending myself every day. Like girls wanted to fight me all the time. And that just wasn't what I knew, but it was kind of what I was dealing with. And so when I came back to New York, I think I was in even more of a rebellious stage because I had that experience. I was just, I want to do what I want to do. I want to be myself finally and not feel this shame or sense of like fighting, I guess. But yeah, my teenage years were tough.
Girl, me too, girl. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I want to hear about yours.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's so funny. In last week's episode with Julio Torres, we were just talking about how like I had a very happy childhood for the most part. I mean, my parents divorced when I was 3, and I was just raised with myself, my mother, and my sister in a really small little farm town. And it was very up until about 12 years old when my mother remarried my stepfather and we moved to a bigger town. Up until that time, I was very sheltered and very much lived in my imagination, was very creative, was able to express myself in a very authentic manner. I was dancing, I was doing gymnastics, I was skating, I was very artistic and very expressive. And then, around the age of like 12 or so years old, when kids start to become quite cruel, I really suppressed all of those things in myself. I stopped doing all of those things because I was so fearful that I just didn't want to put a target on my back anymore. I didn't want to continue to do those things because I thought that those were the things that were making people make fun of me for, because I was a dancer, because I was a gymnast. And so I stopped doing them. And I stopped doing those things, but they didn't stop bullying me. So all of those years really are so suppressed for me. I don't really remember my puberty years. There's not a lot of photographs. There's not a lot of memories or stories or anecdotes. I was in so much pain emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I didn't feel really safe anywhere that I went. I didn't feel like I could turn to any adults in my immediate environment for help or support, or anyone could really understand what it was that I was going through. I really rebelled during those years. I was angry. I was lonely. I felt so misunderstood. Because I stopped doing all of those extracurricular things that were really feeding my soul and I was so passionate about and was really good at as a kid, that all of that energy had to go elsewhere. It had to go somewhere. It had to be channeled through some form of expression of myself. And that came with rebelling, with like smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and skipping school and smoking weed and stealing money from my parents. And upon reflection as an adult, I can see that it was all of it was just a cry for help. All of it was just a desperate cry for attention. But even when I did get people's attention, I didn't feel safe enough to express myself as to why I was behaving this way. Like me skipping school, it was because I was being so horribly bullied at school. But going to the powers that be, my teachers or my parents, I couldn't say, I'm being horribly bullied at school because I'm gay. Because all of the messages that I had been fed from the adults around me was that being gay is not okay. So, so many of those years, they were, I don't remember them. I really don't. Even when I try to reflect upon them, it's very vague in many ways. I remember the highlights, like my dearest friends who really were my saving grace in so many moments. And I have a couple of those friends to this day are still my dearest friends. Jessica Rowan in Red Deer, Alberta is one of my best friends in the world. And she's someone who's been a sister to me since I was 14 years old. And really probably the first example I had of chosen family. But yeah, man, those years were rough. And I remember feeling the same way, similar to what you were saying, when I graduated high school and left and moved away and started modeling. Like I finally felt free and like I was able to express myself. And that was very messy. It was a very messy process of like, for the first time in my life, having that sense of freedom and ability to be able to express myself in the world in the way that I wanted to. It was like a lot of trial and error and a lot of fumbling, really horrible style choices, really horrible bending choices. Really, like it was a process, but it was through contrast and like learning what didn't work for me, what did work for me, and then finding balance in that, I think. And I'm still finding balance.
Yeah. Never-ending journey.
Yeah, definitely.
What did it look like with your mom, though? Was it something that you felt like she was compassionate or even aware of, that you were going through this when you were still living at home?
Yeah, I mean, my mom is one of my favorite people on the planet, and I feel like I gave her a pass so often as a kid because I just knew I gave her a pass in the sense that for her not being there for me in the way that I felt like I needed her to be there for me, because even as a kid, I was aware that she just didn't know any better. She had not been exposed to otherness. She didn't, she had been raised in a very strict Caucasian environment. Her father was a warden of a prison. Her mother was a nurse. She was just like, it was very regimented. She was the oldest child. So it was very much put into a parent role at a very young age. She very much like existed within the bubble of the status quo, and so had no reference for the experience of a person of color or the experience of a queer person. She had no friends who were queer or gay. So as much as I knew that she loved me unconditionally and could see that I was in a tremendous amount of pain, she didn't know how to help, and she didn't have the ability within herself at that time to even like have the vocabulary to form the questions to ask me. So it's in many ways, as much as I love my mother and gave her lots of passes as a kid, I can see now that where so many of her shortcomings were, and we've talked about it. And she's learned so much and is so open to being exposed to otherness now at this point in her life, as she has for the past several decades since I left home. But I think just thinking of my experience with her and then any advice that I could possibly give to any parent out there who may have a child who is at all different, I guess I can narrow it down. Like even if it's a white family adopting a person of a child of color, or if it's a family raising a child who you believe may be queer or gender non-binary or trans or gay or lesbian or whatever, do your research. Like I feel like one of the biggest mistakes that so many people make when adopting children, when white families adopt children of color, is not having any point of reference or knowledge or education themselves on that child's lineage, on their bloodline, because that parent may look at the child and see just their child. They love unconditionally. They don't see them as any different than them or their family members or whatever, but they are. And the reality is when they step out into the world is going to look at them as different, as queer or as a person of color. So if you don't arm yourself and therefore arm your child is going to go out into that world completely defenseless and then suffer mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually for years because of it. So my mom and I have come to a really solid and loving place in our relationship. But through those years in my teen years, I don't think it was just like the cliche, woe is me. Oh my God, I'm so alone as a teenager. Like I was very much alone. What about you? Did you have, even through all of those times and those hardships and your mother going from 0 to 100 in her punishments, did you still feel like you had a connection, an understanding, a safe space to go to?
I mean, while I was living in DC, like I adore my father. I really do. He's the most phenomenal man. But we very much had like a typical divorced family relationship. I would be with him on the weekends and for vacation. So from going from that to now living with him and then living with him with his new wife, he also took in one of his good friends from high school, her daughter, because she was having issues with, just running the streets in New York. So he took us in at the same time. Yeah, she also came from Brooklyn, and she and I were also very different. We didn't really have anything in common. And so it felt like just going into this environment that didn't feel like home. It felt like just this never ending punishment, essentially. Like I'm here because I did this bad thing. And I don't really relate to anyone here. It's not like I can talk to anyone here. So I would call my mother as often as possible and be in New York every weekend. I would take the bus, the Chinese bus, to New York every weekend, any chance I got. And even now I think about it, and I think it's just probably the biggest factor into a lot of things that I had to reconcile within my relationship with myself, and then my mom, my stepmom, my father, and learning some forgiveness, because like you said, your mother was experiencing something a little different. She didn't know because she's not a person of color. And I think for my mom, it was just the fact that she was a first-time mother and didn't necessarily know how to guide me or provide the type of support through these teenage years. I think she was also just kind of tired because she was the main one raising me. And now here I am in this new phase.
Was your grandmother very strict with your mother while growing up, while raising her?
I don't get a lot of those stories. It's interesting. I don't know if that's intentional or, but it sounds like it was a mix of both. It sounds like she was really strict and then softened up because I mean, she's so soft now. Like so I think it probably must have started when she had her first grandchild, I think is when she softened up. Um, but I know that from what I have heard that she was pretty strict. Um, and so, yeah. And then that's also generational, like my grandmother did what she knew. Her parents passed when she was really, really young. And she had 7 other siblings and was one of the oldest. So she ended up taking care of most of them. Um, and so having that experience alone very much set what her life was going to look like for a while. And then my mother did what she knew. And now that I'm a mom, I have all of this information. And funny enough, I actually referred back to the 4 agreements the other day. The last time I read it was when I was at your house.
Yes, I remember.
And this section always stands out just about domestication and how our first experience of being domesticated come from our parents. We are so often like told that whatever their beliefs are should be our beliefs. So there's this sense of right and wrong, reward and punishment. And so we often end up creating a version of ourselves to live within that spectrum. So we do things either to receive this award based on our parents' beliefs or not do things because we don't want to be punished for their beliefs. And I just think there's so much validity to that. And so it's made me a lot more conscious in my parenting style. Everything from like making sure I don't say no to Che, because I want to make sure that when he hears no, he doesn't automatically associate that with him doing something negative or bad. Or even rewarding him in a way that's like, you did something good. And so therefore, versus just having conversations. I mean, he's 1.5, he's in his tantrum phase. So if I see that happening, I try really hard just to talk with him, ask him if he's okay, give him hugs and love, because he doesn't know how to communicate. And I think so many of us, even though you and I are not toddlers or weren't toddlers when we were teenagers, a lot of what we were wanting was just that communication to either feel heard or feel like we had that support. And I try to be really intentional about that. Like, how can I lend this support, even though he's so young, to him so that he feels loved and protected? And it's a balancing act. And I feel myself getting to a point where I'm sure my mother got to, where she was just like, ah. And then I'm like, wow, but she probably did that because that's maybe what she got at some point in her life. All of it is so fascinating. It's like every day you're just shedding skin and I think becoming closer to your highest self. And yeah, I feel really grateful to have this awareness. And I think now I'm a little more comfortable with those moments of discomfort. I'm sure you can relate, but like when you get those feelings of like, oh, this discomfort, I hate it. I just want to like, and then you become more wise and you're like, okay, this discomfort is here for a reason. It means there's change on the horizon and I need to go deeper within that and really explore it and see what it's telling me.
None of this awareness or mindfulness comes by chance or by accident. It all comes with like very thoughtful, conscious daily practices and like minute by minute awareness of self. You've taught me a lot about facilitating a deep connection to and relationship with myself just by me seeing how you are in the world. And even though you're a few years younger than me, I always had just it was always something I was very much aware of from the moment that I first met you and something that I was in awe of. You also taught me the importance of giving yourself that time and energetic attention and nourishment without feeling guilt or selfishness about it. Where do you think that you learned the importance of self-love?
Oh, definitely my parents. Yeah, I think maybe my father a little bit more so. It's so funny because this morning he texted me and said, "Good morning, Kai and Che. what feeling is evoked in the room when I walk in? And yeah. And so I was like, wait, do you want me to answer that for you or for me? And so he was like, me. And I was like, grace, integrity, and I just list all these things. But yeah, he really is that person. I'm in awe of who I can't even just say man, because to me, he really just embodies humanity as a whole. And I've never met anyone like him. His circumstances, like his childhood, he has never met his father. He doesn't even know his father's name or what he looks like. So he never had like that male guidance in his life. So to see how he created himself is just so powerful to me. He grew up in Bed-Stuy as well. And, he went through that phase where he was like selling drugs on the street, doing little petty crimes and things like that. And then he is such a man of commitment. One day he decided that just wasn't going to be his life. And he decided to dedicate himself to trying to free essentially the Black community. So from the time he was in college up until now, he's been working for several organizations, has created his own organizations. He works with young Black fathers and low income communities and getting them housing rights. And the list it's so expansive. He is constantly taking in children that aren't his own and giving them shelter under his own roof. And so he does it in such a graceful way, not in the sense of trying to get any kind of notoriety, or if anything, he's the most humble. And because he does all of these things in this way, I always have felt this sense of like, wow, this man really loves who he is. Like, he is the definition of self-love, because he does for others. And I think the only way you can truly do for others is if you love yourself. You've allowed yourself to be the person who is making the sacrifices for an entire community of people. And I was talking to my sister just a couple of days ago, and just another realization, like, because the neighborhood has changed so drastically. And I posted something on my Instagram, and someone commented how they ended up leaving the store because they thought there were too many white people in the store. And they felt like, as a Black business owner, that wasn't okay. And that overall, they felt like most Black business owners do the same, I guess, allowing non-Black people in the space. And so it just really got me thinking. And I called my sister to talk about it. And she brought up a point that I thought was so interesting, which was, you can think that the store is doing something for the community, but you have to think about maybe that little Black girl who grew up in the hood and who had that one bad experience where she went into a store and she wasn't welcome there. And so when she sees your store, something that's different for the neighborhood, she may feel like she's not welcome there either. Maybe that person who wrote that comment is coming from that belief, that, that same thought process. You never know. But overall, until you are putting yourself on the front line and doing that lifelong work for your community, and understanding that some days you'll be so exhausted and you'll feel like it's for naught because you still aren't seeing the progress, you can't really say it's for the community. And it automatically made me think about my father, because I know he is that person. And so, yeah, I think he really taught me self-love. And I'm still learning it. I think I'm still learning what that looks like.
Was it Destiny that you were talking to, your sister Destiny?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very emotionally wise of her to be able to take a step back and try to see it from that person's possible perspective of their possible experience of trauma, which I can completely relate to, and I'm sure you can as well on many levels. But with that said, and having that level of compassion and understanding, switching the perspective to that of yours or a Black business owner who may be in the same position as you in a neighborhood like Bed-Stuy, what is the solution? Because to me, the solution isn't barring white people or non-people of color. Like, what is the fix to that without becoming the evil ourselves?
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know. And I asked myself that same question because, at the end of the day, there is a certain system in place, and that is to be profitable as a business. And I'm not going to deny anyone who wants to spend money in the space to come in. At the same time, I can see how it might be a bit disheartening, especially if you're from this neighborhood, to go into a space and feel like this isn't what I know this neighborhood to be, because I don't see faces in here that look like mine. And it's challenging too, because the neighborhood itself has just changed so drastically. Like, I walk down the street and I'm sometimes the only Black person for a few blocks. And I never thought that that would happen, but that's just what it is. And so, I certainly can see the point in this person's comment, but I also think it's such a bigger conversation, because it's not just about, okay, these people are occupying spaces in these environments that were maybe set out to be safe for us. But what does that look like on a larger scale? Are we seeking the information to have home ownership or to own in general in our own communities? And there's also two sides of that spectrum. That information is not readily available to most of us. And so if we're not seeking it, we're most likely not going to even know how to start that process, let alone afford that process. And it's really tough. It's tough because there's just so much to figure out, and it can feel really, really overwhelming. And like, where do we start? How do we begin to organize and become stronger? But I can see the duality in that comment. And I know as a business owner, like, you always have to think about the business. And then if you have a space like mine or any space that's trying to kind of promote community, think about the community as well. It's tough finding that balance. But yeah, I certainly don't agree with, like, we can't let white people in here. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, it's just not realistic.
Yeah, shit. I mean, even I'm kind of at a loss for words right now because, yeah, like I said, as much as I can see that person's perspective, I can also feel that it's more likely than not coming from a place of unprocessed trauma.
Yeah.
And right now, in this current political environment we find ourselves in, with this current administration, with the state of the country, with the ongoing tragedy of police violence against Black bodies. I mean, the level of divisiveness is just it seems like it's at an all-time high right now. It's more likely than not actually at an all-time high. It's probably just on par with how it's always been. We're just all hyper aware of it because of the advent of video phones, and because of social media, and because right now specifically all of us are just so confined that we're hyper aware of the goings on in the outside world and the way that we operate with each other and navigate with each other. But man, I mean,
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, we have so much accessibility too. Like, you can go on Instagram now and read a headline and take that at face value.
yeah.
It's kind of desensitized a lot of things that have been happening for a while that should not desensitize us. I don't know if you relate, but obviously, the most recent tragedy in our community that's happened, I think for the first time, I'm kind of hearing a communal agreement that no one is really surprised. No one is really surprised. They're just frustrated. And I would really, really love to know where to begin. Okay, we're all frustrated. So what do we do with that frustration now and be productive? Because,
I actually saw and was so taken by a very thoughtful post that you had written on your personal Instagram. I was so taken by it. Do you mind if I read it?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Regards to the recent, I guess it wasn't so recent, it was February 23rd, but the recent shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, the Black man in Georgia who was simply running down the street and was hunted down by really 3 gunmen. But Kai posted this on her Instagram recently. Sending much love to my Black community who are feeling enraged and sadness right now. The only way for us to stop being victimized by a system meant to eradicate us is to create our own. I've said it before and will say it again. We, Black people, and I include myself, have all fallen victim to the system, and the system casts a wide net. Everything from diet, religion, politics, media, medicine, language, the list is long. Because the powers that be thought of everything possible to target us. They made processed foods more accessible in our communities. They set up liquor stores on every corner. They made us feel shame around our own heritage so that in turn, we're more susceptible to honor and celebrate Western heritage and tradition. Quick thought, why is it that we can easily name every Western holiday with dates, but can't think of one African holiday that celebrates us? And they do exist. There is power in ritual, and when we celebrate the rituals of those who oppress us, we give them more power. With all that brainwashing that continues today, because now there's this agenda called, quote unquote, inclusivity that's supposed to make us feel equal or valued, when all along we are the most valued. Our power has been stripped away, but we still remain dominant. I try hard not to be so reactionary anymore. It's a process. The moral of the story is let's truly begin to look at the bigger picture in every single arena. Let's start to celebrate us, celebrate and honor our own culture and heritage. There is power in tradition, in our African traditions. I don't want to sign another petition. I want real action and real change that starts with talking about creating our own systems. I have no interest in taking part in a society that constantly puts a Band-Aid on crimes against Black and brown people. Out of all of the think pieces and soulful, heartfelt words that I've read, those were the ones that certainly resonated the deepest with me.
Oh, I'm so happy about to hear that.
All of that, it really is posing question after question as to what do we do next? I don't think any of us really collectively have an answer to that, but part of the answer is in the question itself. It's how do we begin to celebrate ourselves? Because with that celebration it inevitably comes a form of healing in some way, shape, or form, you know? So much love and respect to everybody who's been either personally affected by police brutality and violence, to everyone worldwide who is dealing with the trauma by proxy of simply feeling unsafe in the world and not knowing who to trust or if we're next. It's not easy.
Isn't.
But we got each other. That's a good place to start, right? I want to go back to what you were saying about when you moved back to New York and went to school and you met Malish, you were studying drama. What was the vision that you held for yourself at that time? Like, what did you aspire to? Who did you want to be?
Oh, I thought I was going to be an actress.
Really?
Yeah. You didn't know this about me?
I mean, I knew that you dabbled, and I knew that you're fucking gorgeous. You're ridiculous. You're one of the most beautiful human beings. I have a portrait of you that I took, blown up, mega size on my living room wall. Like, I look at you every day. It's stupid stunning. Look like an actress. You fit the bill, but I didn't know how serious you were about it. For me, it was something that I was always told from the time that I was like 3 years old. You are an actor. You will be an actor. My family told me you're going to move to Hollywood. You belong there. So it was just like, it didn't even really seem like a choice to me, even though they didn't force me into it. I'm not saying that. Like, it was just a seed that was planted so early. I didn't consider any other options. But the same for you, that was just who you always thought that you would be.
Yeah. Before I even say that, we have to make a note that you are the only person I know who can literally manifest something as easily as you do. And it happens. Like, since I've known you, I've watched so many manifestations that you've spoken out loud actually come to life. And I'm blown away. Because when I met you, you were modeling, and then you literally were just like, I want to get into acting. And it was just that, and it happened. Like, you are now acting. You can see Jeffrey on TV. It's crazy. But yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny because earlier today I was thinking about, I always have like a setup of crystals all around me. You can't see right now, but I have like pyrite and smoky quartz and black tourmaline all around me, and celestite, and it's all, a lot of stones of manifestation, because I'm very much a part of who I am. But while I was setting this up, I was very much thinking of you in that regard, that you are a master manifester as well. And it doesn't just come from a place of like saying it out loud, setting the intention, and just sitting back waiting it for happen. A lot of the times it does take like conscious action and effort to get there. So thank you for that. What you see in me, I also see reflected in you. Just FYI.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be an actress. I was studying theater for about almost 8 years. Even before I got accepted into Talent Unlimited, I was studying at the New York Film Academy and Boys Harbor, and would take summer programs there every single summer, every single weekend. And I was doing everything from like Shakespeare to, more mainstream productions. And my theater coach, oh my gosh, I love him so much. I haven't seen him in so long, but his name was Edwin. He really just took me under his wing and thought I was going to be the next big thing. Little did he know I got into fashion, I guess. But that was my medium for a very long time. And I think that just came because I knew I was different, and here was a place where I got to just be free. I loved improv. It was like one of my favorite things ever.
This is all so new to me. I didn't know this. That's so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, acting classes on the weekends were like my favorite. It was probably one of the first places I ever felt safe, because all of the kids in the program were also just, a little different. I knew something special was there. We all wanted to express ourselves, and here was an avenue to be able to do that. And I think Edwin was just so remarkable with us. He was remarkable. He had a really severe stutter, and the only time he didn't stutter was when he was on stage. And he was an incredible actor. And so, that was what I thought I was going to be for a while.
I really had no idea. Why? What was the turning point? Because when I met you, you were already stepping into the world of retail. I mean, you were sickeningly stylish, as you still are. You have exquisite taste, but fashion was also something that was a passion of yours that you were following. When did the acting part, when did that start to wane? Or when did the shift occur?
Maybe when I started going to FIT. My dad signed me up for the weekend programs there. I don't remember if there was like something that inspired him. I must have said like, oh, I like fashion now. I think I always did. He got me like one of my birthdays for my gift. He got me like this trunk, and inside the trunk were all of these different costumes. And so I think from that point is when the fashion thing really took off. So I started taking classes at FIT, and I was doing textile design and accessory design and sketching. And then from there, I was like, I want to be a designer. And I really did for a while. And I dabbled in that once the store was open. We had an in-house line for a couple of years that did really, really well.
The Sincerely Tommy line.
Mm-hmm,
Is it no longer?
Yeah, I stopped doing it. When I started it, there wasn't really a plan in place. I just found a production company in the city, and it just took off. We got a lot of buyers, mostly in Japan, and I didn't have a business plan when it came to that side. So I was just kind of winging it, and I didn't realize how much actually went into the process. And I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need a team, and we need a plan every season. And I'm glad I got that experience. I know that it's something that I probably wouldn't do again. Maybe a consultant, but not my own. Yeah, not doing my own.
And then that all, I mean, throughout this entire conversation, we've been leading up to getting into the birth of your love child. Well, we're talking about Che, but I'm also talking about Sincerely Tommy. Your first baby, honey. Your first. Okay. So you give so much very deserved credit to your grandmother and mom. In any way that you feel like telling this story, tell us how Sincerely Tommy came to be.
Sincerely Tommy came to be from me wanting to create this space in Bedford-Stuyvesant that felt like um, it could inspire other young creatives just to create whatever that looked like. If they wanted to maybe start their own line, or they just wanted to come there to write or meet other people, that's really what I wanted. And I also just wanted to share things that I really loved and felt inspired by. Most of that being through my traveling and wanting to share that with this community. And I just approached my grandmother and asked her about helping me find a space where we could open this store. And she was on it. We did it within 6 months. And
Wow.
it really took off. I never had the intention of like gaining so much notoriety. I just wanted a space. But people really took to it. And it's been here for 6 years now, which is so weird to say because it still feels like just a year ago. But yeah, it's grown and transformed in so many ways. And
The success of it is that people can pick up on the authenticity of the space, and you've never been one to subscribe to mainstream anything. I mean, you're always seeking out and ultimately finding whatever inspires you and speaks directly to your soul, whether that be music or film or books or artworks or designers, anything that's kind of like off the beaten path.
yeah,
I mean, whenever I walk into the space, I see that it's like a perfect expression and reflection of who you are.
yeah,
Um, and I'm so glad that there's been such tremendous success with it, and that it speaks so clearly to others in the community as well. And I think that people just can so easily feel your
yeah.
support in others in the community as well. I mean, I'm just one example. You carried my t-shirts there, the t-shirt line that I did with Lemon Lacine, our mutual friend, someone who wouldn't have come into my world had it not been for you inviting me into the tribe. Your passion for Sincerely Tommy translates into something that goes back to your grandmother's roots and your love of Grenada. I mean, you're planning on opening a Sincerely Tommy wellness retreat in Grenada. What does that look like?
Oh God. Honestly, that's probably where my passion lies the most right now. I think because everything that we've just talked about, my spirit is just really craving earth right now, and wanting to be in that environment. So I'm really excited about it. My mom is actually spearheading that project. This was her idea. Wellness is such a big part of who she is. So she just basically decided that she wanted to open up a wellness space. At first, it was like just going to be a retreat where she would invite people to come stay at our home down there. And then it turned into I'm going to build a whole new facility. And this is going to actually be like a wellness estate. And so she did that. The last year, she's spent building, she has an infrared sauna that's in its own like space. And then she like did this kind of wabi sabi concrete building that is a dormitory for guests. And it's so incredible. So I'm really excited because I haven't even been to the new building or home. I don't know what to call it. It's not a building, but yeah. And the land is just so lush. Like you have every fruit and vegetable growing on the property that you can imagine. So I'm starting to call it a commune and not a wellness space because it's always been my dream to live on a commune, and everything we need is there.
I can't wait to come down and visit the space in
Oh, I
Grenada. How exciting!
love you. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know that travel is so important to you and such a huge part of who you are and how you foster and nourish your inspiration, where you find inspiration from all of your travels in the world. And so much of it you do solo. I mean, so many of your trips are like to really gorgeous, obscure, beautiful, and bizarre places all over the world. Have you started to travel with your son now at this point with Che?
Oh yeah. We were we had two trips planned during this time. So I just thank the universe that, we were able to get out of that and be at home and be safe. while this is happening. But yeah, it was always a dream of mine that when I had my own family, that travel would be a big part of our lives at a very early stage. And he's been to Grenada and he's been to Oaxaca, which, Mexico is one of my favorite places. Um, and we were supposed to be in Italy, which I'm really grateful we're not. And then from there going to Senegal. But yeah, I think traveling has probably been the biggest learning experience for me outside of like what my parents have instilled in me and any educational system. I just learning and seeing how other people live it's life changing. We are very jaded in America, and we often look at things very linearly. And so when you are able and have that opportunity to experience other cultures, you expand. And I know that I personally am really drawn to going to places where the people have a connection to their land and their community. So, I obviously love dry places. I try to go to a desert landscape as many times as possible in the year.
Do you ever see yourself leaving New York, like living outside of New York?
I do. I really, really do. I thought it would be Mexico, but now I'm really thinking it's going to be Grenada, like kind of I don't know what you'd call that. It's not really bi-coastal, but island coastal. I want to spend more time in Grenada with Che. One, family's just so big for me, and there isn't anywhere else I could go where I'm going to have my family there other than Grenada. And so I think that's where it's going to be.
How has becoming a new mother and having Che being in your life helped you evolve into a new version of yourself?
Oh, it in every way, every way. I think anyone who's a mother can say that it is the biggest mirror you will ever have. He challenges me in every single way possible, and he's this little boy, but such an immense being too. He is so incredible, and at a really early age, I could just see how tender and gentle he was, and he has so many of his own personality traits that are just his own. And so I have to really nurture those. He's allowed me to become more patient. I'm not the most patient person. And so, yeah.
You and I are very similar in that
Oh,
respect.
yeah. Oh, yes. I know that. Because when you share stories with me about how you react to, I'm like, he's really talking about me. I get it.
Trust me, it's a practice. It is a daily practice. I am trying.
It
Yeah.
is.
It's funny because it's interesting. That kind of goes back to what you were just saying. Like so much of who Che is right now, like has their very specific qualities of character that aren't yours. They are his own, and it is who he is and who he was born to be. And so much of, even it's not, I'm not making an excuse. I'm not saying that it's something that I need to like hold on to for dear life, but my impatience is something that has been a part of me since I was a kid, a little kid. My whole life, all I've heard from my mom is relax, go with the flow, surrender, like chill the fuck out, Jeffrey.
So you're saying that you're trying to let go of it more, or just understand that it is part of the uniqueness of you?
Both. In recognizing that it's part of the uniqueness of me, it makes me much less hard on myself, and not quote unquote hate that or dislike that side of myself, while still giving myself space to recognize that parts of it, although they've helped me and were necessary in navigating my way through the world at a certain point in my life, my impatience certainly added to some of my successes. I started from very humble beginnings in an environment that I had no idea as to how I could be living the life that I was living today. And if I just like sat back and been patient and just kind of like hoped that things would come as they came in their due time, I wouldn't be where I am. So that impatience has served me in many ways. but it also is incredibly detrimental to just a general level of ease in any relationship or dynamic. And I have to recognize that it's not that my impatience can also impact or negatively affect those around me who I love and care about most.
Yeah, that's real. Really enjoy your alone time.
Oh, girl, I need it. I need my alone time. And it's, as you're saying that Che is such a reflection of you, mother, a child is a reflection to any parent. Being in a relationship, it's definitely a reflection of myself as well, my good and my bad. And I realized that and under normal circumstances where you're not quarantined, and I'm so blessed to be quarantined with my boyfriend right now. I love him so much, and we're so compatible in many ways. It's not always easy being in this situation, especially being someone like myself who needs my alone time. It is not personal. It is how I recharge, and I recognize that I am not nourishing myself or allowing myself or just consciously carving out that amount of time to be with myself. The indicator that it's very indicative to me that I'm not doing those things for myself when I start to be impatient. And when it starts to affect him, that level of self-care is necessary in order for me to be the best version of myself. But also, that said, I also recognize that I can't be the best version of myself at all times. And under these circumstances where we are quarantined and we're together 24/7, and he's not going to work to the office and I'm not going out in the world working, and we're not doing our own thing by going to the gym and seeing friends independently, like we're just seeing all of each other, and all of the little things are just being magnified right now. So yes, that level of introspection and like self-awareness is something to be conscious of and to work on. But I also am doing it in a way that it's like there's not a desperate sense of urgency to it. Like I'm becoming aware of these things, and now I like take step by step by step in order to try to heal them.
Yeah.
How are you doing at this time of? You need just as much alone time as I do.
Ask you, like, do you guys carve that time out where you're like, okay, I just need an hour in my room or like in the backyard to just be alone?
Getting better at it. I need it more so than he does. And I guess I'm trying to get over I was just talking about this last night, actually, about the guilt of doing that, because I'm already, even though we're together in the house all day, every day, and it's a big house, and he's on one side of it and I'm on the other, he's working and I'm working. I know that I'm trying to get over the guilt of not being there for him, emotionally present in those hours when I'm working. And then also on top of that, feeling like I need to go take an hour or two to myself to go be with myself, like just getting over the guilt of that, and not begrudgingly spending time with somebody because I feel guilty, because then that time is not really quality time. It's not really infused with the presence and loving compassion that you want that quality time to be infused with. So I'm learning. I'm getting better at it day by day, but it's a practice. Some days are better than others. Truly, nobody's perfect, and I would never claim to be. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? How you doing right now? It's just you and Che for the most part. He's gone this weekend.
Yeah. We have weeks where it's really good, and then we have other weeks where I'm like, oof. He is a very social child and loves being around people, so he's really missing that component. Normal routine consists of being around a lot of kids, and so it's just he and I, and he's attached at my hip. If I make a move to the left, he's making a move to the left. So that's been a real shift for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I entertain a 1.5-year-old all day long? Because that's really all he wants. He wants me to play and entertain him, and it's definitely new. But I keep kind of referring to in my mind, like, what do I want him to feel right now? What energy do I need to try to emit so that he can feel at peace and calm, because this is also new for him. So I really try to just remain peaceful and calm. There's days where maybe I'll get an email, or, on the business side, we didn't get that grant that I applied for that could really help. And I'm like, fuck this. But I still got to show face because I'm a mom too. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about just being in Grenada for a while once all of this has gone over.
I know that you spend a lot of time in meditation, and I think right now more so than ever, because we need that time to ourselves, filling ourselves back up is so important, especially for you, especially as somebody who has no choice but to show up, and because you are a mother responsible for another living being. What are your spiritual practices at this point?
I love my sound bowl. It's so transformative. I've never been much of a person who likes to work out. And in fact, it was kind of the bane of my existence for a while. After having a baby, you have no choice. I was not shedding that baby weight. And with all this free time, you got to work out. And it's been so transformative. Like, I use the rebounder, those little trampolines. That's really good for your lymphatic system, releasing negativity overall. And it's so incredible because you're moving all planes of your body and just really like the blood is circulating.
Just those little miniature trampolines for one, see at like elementary school gyms.
Mm-hmm.
You do workouts on that.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
You should. Absolutely. My mom uses it. And so when she's been in Grenada for like the last 6 months, so I went over to her house and she had one there. I stayed there for a couple of days just to get some rest. And I used it and I was like, whoa, why did I never like really pay attention to this?
Is that your daily exercise routine?
Every day.
I'm totally going to get one of these. A rebound trampoline. That's what they're called?
Rebounder. They range from like 80 up until 500, depending on like the quality. So yeah, that has been a part of my daily practice. And it's been so amazing. And just being able to like, I forgot what this was, where I learned this, but it's a form of acupressure. And so
just shaking it out. Just
shedding, right. And so when you're on the rebounder, it kind of feels like you're doing that for your whole body.
That makes so much sense. I remember seeing years ago, it was either on like a National Geographic special or like a David Attenborough wildlife series, but it was talking about how every animal on the planet, to release energy after they are in a stressful environment or are in a confrontation with another animal, whatever it may be, whenever they walk away from it, they shake their body out. They shake out from head to toe and they release the energy. Every animal on the planet does that except for humans.
It's really beautiful. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been really wonderful. I do Pilates as well, which I really love because you're strengthening from the inside. And to me, that just makes more sense.
Are you doing videos right now? Like I'll put all of this in the show notes for the listeners.
Yeah, I'll share the videos with you because some specific to new moms. But the workouts, my sound bowl, before I go to sleep, I always do like a small meditation, just breathing. And I try to read 10 pages before bed of something that can just kind of clear my mind, give me something to go to sleep with on a more positive note.
What are you reading right now?
I'm reading 4 different books. 4 Agreements again. I'm reading a book on co-parenting. I'm reading Mindful Parenting. And the other book is The Path of the Priestess.
When was the last time you cried?
Yesterday.
What is some of the best advice you've ever received?
Something I read recently that's really standing out, which is, how other people see me is not my business, so long as I am in tune and integrity and operating from the heart center to the best of my ability. How others see me is not my work. Those who have eyes to see me will. By Miriam Hasna.
Oh, I love that. That is very reminiscent to a quote from RuPaul. If them bitches ain't paying your bills, pay them bitches no mind.
Yes.
Where do you feel most authentically yourself?
The desert.
Yeah. What do you celebrate or love most about yourself? That's a really good question.
I love that I am always open for improvement.
Ooh. I'm going to take a lesson from that one right there, honey. What is whispering inside of you the loudest right now? What is your intuition telling you?
To leave to Grenada.
Yeah.
When I say Grenada, I don't just mean like, oh, I'm escaping to Grenada. I think everything that we've all experienced during this pandemic is very telling of where we are as a society. And I think there's some real, I think there's going to be many more shifts. And one thing I try to stand by is like, if I can look at my life and my lifestyle and say that I'm moving in a direction that promotes the change I want to see, then, I can feel good. I can feel grounded, and I don't necessarily see returning back to the same routine and feeling proud of that lifestyle. I need something different.
You're evolving.
Yeah.
And lastly, what do you want to be remembered for, or how do you want to be remembered?
I think consistency is something that always stands out for me. So consistency and grace. And grace is something that I'm still working towards, like very much so. I have a lot to learn about that. But I feel like consistency and grace and integrity are three very strong traits to be able to possess. And I think they require really going in deep within yourself to be able to give them authentically. A lot of those three things also just like they're the epitome of intention, of living a life of intention too. So yeah, I'd like to be known for those three things.
And it's all a practice.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we are out of time. Thank you for tuning into my frequency, and thank you to my sensational guest, Kai Avent-deLeon, for having this conversation with me.
This was awesome.
Yeah, this was so great. I love you so much.
I love you. You're so amazing.
Thanks, honey. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And if I can leave you all with one thing, it's this: celebrate yourself and love each other. I'm JBC, and I love you. Remember to subscribe, rate, and leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you tune into our frequency. You can support us by sharing this episode with a friend and spreading the love with each other. You can find us at conversationswithothers.com and reach us at Conversations with Others on Instagram, at CWO Podcast on Twitter, and Conversations with Others Podcast at gmail.com. Our outro song is Looking for Another by Brittany Allen.